In 2011, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service declared the eastern cougar extinct. You strapped a trail cam to an oak east of the Mississippi, forgot about it for weeks, and when you pulled the card, one frame stopped you cold. 3 a.m, a long tail, thick at the base, curling almost to the ground. Too big for a bobcat. Built low and heavy through the shoulders, moving through the frame the way something moves when it already knows the woods better than you do. So here's the question. If the animal is extinct, what's walking through these woods? And if it's not extinct, what happens when it finds you? To understand why that photograph is a problem, you have to understand what the eastern cougar actually was. It wasn't a rumor or a folktale animal. It was a real subspecies of mountain lion that ranged from Maine down through the Appalachians into South Carolina, an apex predator that had run those ridgelines since long before anyone put a fence on them. Bounty programs paid out for dead cougars for decades, and settlers cleared the forest the cats needed to hunt in. By the early 1900s, the eastern cougar was functionally gone. Not endangered. Gone. The 2011 review wasn't a quick decision. Fish and Wildlife gathered evidence from 21 states, reviewed over 100 scientific studies, and fielded more than 500 public reports before they would put their name on it. And at the end of it, the conclusion was specific. No wild breeding population remained east of the Mississippi. In 2018, the subspecies was formally pulled off the endangered species list. That's the bureaucratic version of a death certificate. You don't protect a species that no longer exists to protect. The reasoning behind it was narrow and deliberate. Over 70 years, and nobody had confirmed a den site. Nobody had confirmed a breeding female. No consistent evidence of cougars raising young anywhere in the East. So if the official record says they're gone, what do you do with a photograph that says otherwise? Here's the wrinkle almost every headline dropped on the floor. The agency never said 0 cougars. It said 0 established population. Those are two very different claims wearing the same word, extinct. And the distinction matters more than anyone gave it credit for at the time, because individual cougars kept turning up. And the explanation for that, the one wildlife agencies settled on, and mostly still stand behind, points west. Way west. South Dakota's Black Hills has a real breeding population, and young males get pushed out of that territory by older, larger males competing for the same ground. Those young males disperse, and cougars can cover extraordinary distances alone, cutting across state after state looking for territory, and a mate neither of which they'll find in the East. On paper, it's a clean answer. A lone male walking 1,000 miles from South Dakota explains one photograph, one grainy trail cam frame at 3 a.m. It held up fine, right up until the sightings stopped being rare enough to explain one at a time. Since 2011, confirmed cougar sightings have piled up in places the official map says should be empty. Michigan, Tennessee, Arkansas, Ohio, Wisconsin, Missouri, states running the whole length of the Midwest into the Appalachians, all logging cases that wildlife agencies themselves accepted as real. And that word, confirmed, is doing a lot of work, so it's worth stopping on. A neighbor calling in to say they saw a big cat cross the road at dusk doesn't count. Every state wildlife agency east of the Mississippi requires physical evidence, tracks with the right size and shape, scat that can be tested, a trail camera photo with a documented location, and a timestamp nobody can fake. Here's what that looks like on the ground. A landowner checks a camera and finds a photo that isn't ambiguous. The long tail, the size, the low heavy gait no bobcat or dog produces, and reports it. A state biologist reviews the image, sometimes visits the site, measures track width in the mud if there's any left, and either confirms it as a cougar or doesn't. That's the process behind every state total on the books. One photograph or one track cast at a time. checked by somebody whose job is to be skeptical. Some of those confirmations go further, into a lab. Scat samples and hair snagged on brush get run through genetic testing, and in a number of cases, the DNA traces cleanly back to the Black Hills population in South Dakota. Those results are real evidence, and they hold up the dispersing male theory about as well as any theory gets held up. A young male cougar, pushed out of South Dakota territory, walking east for months, showing up on a camera in Missouri or Kentucky. The genetics say that's exactly what happened, at least in those specific cases. But here's where the tidy version starts to strain. Some of the confirmed animals, the ones with lab-verified DNA, weren't young dispersing males at all. They were female. That's not supposed to happen. And a female cougar showing up 1,000 miles from the nearest known population doesn't fit the dispersing male story, because female cougars don't disperse that way. They tend to stay close to where they were born, close to their mother's territory, a pattern biologists call philopatry. It's the reason a female mountain lion in Kentucky is a much harder animal to explain away than a male in the exact same spot. So a second theory sits alongside the first, and it's not fringe science. Some biologists argue that a small remnant population never actually went extinct, that a handful of cougars survived at low density in the roughest, most remote pockets of Appalachian and Ozark terrain, places nobody was walking often enough to find them. Low numbers, wide spacing, an animal built to avoid being seen doing exactly that for the better part of a century. Wildlife agencies still officially reject that idea. Their position hasn't moved. No den, no litter, no verified breeding pair of the eastern subspecies, so no established population. And that's the standard they set back in 2011. So here's what the official record can't answer. If a female cougar is walking through the east, and she's not supposed to be, where is she coming from? For the person who owns that oak tree with the camera strapped to it, none of that paperwork matters. What they know is what walked past their barn at 3 in the morning. And rural residents have been saying this for a long time. Hunters walking a ridge at first light. Farmers checking livestock after something spooked the herd overnight. For decades, those reports got filed under the same explanation. Bobcat, probably, or somebody's big dog running loose. Wildlife agencies had a stock answer, and most of the time, they didn't send anyone out to look. A cougar can cover 100 miles in a matter of weeks, easily touching 4 or 5 states in a single season. A photograph in Arkansas in March and one in Ohio in May could be 2 different animals, or the same one, and nothing about the sighting map can tell you which. Here's what hasn't changed since 2011, no matter how the sighting numbers climb. No den, no litter, no verified breeding female of the eastern subspecies paired with a male anywhere east of the Mississippi. That's still the line, and it's the one the remnant population theory hasn't crossed yet, not with hard proof. So the real stakes were never about whether a cougar can wander through a state that declared it gone. Everyone agrees that happens. The real stakes are whether, somewhere in the country's roughest, least walked terrain, a population is quietly stitching itself back together while the federal paperwork still reads extinct. That's not hypothetical anymore. In 2024, wildlife officials in Michigan's Upper Peninsula confirmed something that hadn't turned up in the region in over a century. A trail camera caught a female cougar traveling with cubs. Not a lone male passing through and moving on. A female raising young on the ground. Then in March of 2026, biologists in northern Minnesota documented another female with 3 kittens, confirmed through direct observation rather than a track cast or a strand of hair caught on brush. That's not a passing through anymore. That's a foothold. Neither female is the eastern subspecies. Wildlife officials are clear that both trace back to the western population. Cats descended from Black Hills stock that pushed east and, this time, stayed. But stayed is the word that matters here. A female that disperses, settles, and raises a litter isn't passing through anymore. She's establishing. If that pattern holds and keeps pushing east instead of stalling out at the Great Lakes, the line between an individual cougar wandering in and a population taking hold stops being theoretical. Extinction, in this case, was never a biological fact stamped into the ground. It was an administrative conclusion, a signature at the bottom of a page after years of gathered evidence. The cougar walking through that trail cam frame never read the report. It doesn't know what the document says about it. The question was never whether a cougar could wander east. It's whether, when the first breeding population is confirmed, we're ready for what comes next. Wildlife agencies will have to rewrite how they manage land, how they warn hunters and homeowners, how they think about an apex predator moving through country that's spent 100 years believing it was safe from one. The question stops being about what happened to a subspecies 15 years ago. It starts being about what's already living in these woods right now. If you want more stories where the official record and the trail cameras don't line up, subscribe. And if you've had a sighting near you, drop your state in the comments. I read every one.